Welcome, action fans, and thanks for joining us for another edition of All 90s Action All the Time, as we continue our journey looking at some of the best, worst, most underseen, and wackiest action movies of 1993. I'm your host, Scott Murphy, and joining me on this edition is my regular co-host. You know who he is. It's screenwriter, comedian, and the ultimate action movie villain. It's Mr. Craig Draheim.
Go, Goomba! Hey, everyone.
So it's almost my favorite part in the episode. Yeah. What quote will Craig use? It's a fun one. Plus, we have a returning special guest in the form of wine connoisseur, Twitch streamer, and namely 90s co-host, Mr. Brandon Schwitter. Hey, Brandon, welcome back to the show.
I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat anything with a face. Sorry, I prepped a quote this time. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me back.
So before we get into today's film, normally we don't talk about your show so much because you've been on a few times. So I think that people might be aware of Namely 90s. You usually give the plug at the end. But since you've had a format change, I shall give you the floor, Brandon, and you can tell people about the all new Namely 90s for 2023.
Oh, yes. All new Namely 90s. We started season 2 of Namely 90s after 2.5 years of doing all 120 months of the 90s. And we started that in January. It started January. And we have 2 new formats for season 2, which switch off every week. We have a variety show format, which covers a variety of topics. It's kind of similar to our old format. We'll usually have like a game or something fun. We'll discuss or debate something. We're still kind of figuring out the nuances to it because the first episode was very ambitious and it ended up being like over an hour, which we aim for like 30 to 40 minutes usually. So, it's still being tweaked out. And then, every other week we have a deep dive format, which either Andrew or I will go into like a deep focused history of something. Andrew's first episode is titled The Rise of the World Wide Web, and he kind of just goes through the evolution of the World Wide Web and the internet up into the 90s, and I sit there and listen and try to make funny jokes. And yeah. Okay. So we're still tweaking out those formats. My deep dive coming up is going to be on Super Soakers. That should be out by the time this is out. Which are the water guns that we had as kids in the 90s.
Can we expect a future episode on the best 90s wines?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I am currently retweaking Rewind, which is my wine series for season 4 release, possibly in February.
You don't want to cross the streams. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I just get so bored when I talk about things that I know. Okay. Even though that's the entire point of the format, we get to talk about stuff that we know about or do research into. I'm sure one week I will just be like, oh, I forgot to do my research, so I'll just do wine from the 90s and the evolution of wine in the 90s. And I will credit Scott for putting that idea in my head.
It's always good to be mentioned on our podcast.
Oh yeah.
And Craig, you're coming to the end of your exciting project. You want to talk a little bit about that before we dive into this bad boy?
Yeah, sure. So the project is called, titled it as I'm the Joke, and it's 2 years now that I've been working on this through research and everything. And the whole topic is based around how we as a society and different groups talk about offensiveness or offensive or taboo materials, and within specifically live comedy. So not trying to purposefully offend people, not to trying to solve what is offensive or not, because that is entirely all subjective, as I go into in great detail and talk about my downward spiral of almost a nervous breakdown of trying to understand all this. But yeah, just how can we better communicate? And it's based on that. Then I also am creating a whole stand-up comedy one-person show where I talk about that and have jokes and so on and so forth. And it's about to be performed, and looking at other venues too, where I'll be performing this piece.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to listening to that. Obviously, I probably won't see the stand-up set, but anybody who's living in the Michigan area, I'm sure that
I am going to try and I am recording it, and so we're going to try and do a full-on make it the whole comedy special.
All right, and you'll be uploading that to like YouTube or something.
Yes,
right. Yep. Great. Okay, well, we'll look out for that. I recommend all the listeners to check that out for the people who like action and comedy. And talking about action and comedy, let's get on to today's film. So, this is the movie that sparked the video game movie trend. It was the first video game movie adaptation, and it was the movie that started the trend that most video game to movie adaptations are almost invariably rubbish. Yes, that's right. Just in time for the new one to drop. It is Super Mario Brothers.
Feeling we're not in Brooklyn no more.
Luigi! Luigi! You better not hurt us!
They're brothers. They're plumbers.
Oh no. Mario! Luigi!
They're on the trail of a kidnapped princess and a mystical meteorite.
It's incredible!
That gives anyone who possesses it the power to rule the universe.
Get me the rock! Come and get it, lizard breath!
Now, they must rescue the princess.
Luigi!
Alien species escaping. And make it safely back.
Later, alligators.
To our world.
Are you alright?
Before time runs out.
Shoot him! Look out, Mario! Get him! Yes! No! Stop! Gotcha! No, not again!
Super Mario Brothers. This ain't no game.
Which was released on May 28th, 1993. It was directed by then husband and wife directing duo Annabelle Jankel and Rocky Morton, who at that time were probably most famous for co-creating Max Headroom. They don't have an extensive filmography, but they both separately and together, when they were still married, have an extensive music video directing career. It was written by Parker Bennett, Terry Runt, and Ed Solomon. Bennett and Runt don't really have any other notable credits. They have like a couple of credits to their names, nothing really famous. Very sadly, Terry Runt died a year after this movie came out when he was only 34. So I was pretty shocked to see that when I was doing the research. Ed Solomon is a much more famous writer. He wrote the screenplays for all 3 Bill and Ted movies, the first Men in Black film, and a bunch of other things. Although this was not the original script of the movie, which we'll probably talk about a bit more later. Critically, it is currently sitting on a 4.1 out of 10 on IMDb, 29% on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 42 reviews, 35 on Metacritic, based on 23 reviews, and it has a 2.0 on Letterboxd. Box office wise, it made $38.9 million off of a budget estimated between 42 and 48 million. However, despite being a critical and box office disaster, it has picked up a cult following over since the 30 years since it's been released, and even has its own dedicated fan site, Super Mario Brothers, the movie archive dedicated to it. So there we go. That's your background details for Super Mario Brothers. So, before we dive into this one, let's talk about our relationship to the film when we first saw the film. If we've seen the film, I don't know if you've seen the film before. I presume you both have. But let's go first with Brandon. When did you first see this? What was your thoughts when you saw it?
Let's see. I didn't see it in theaters, but I definitely had it either on VHS or maybe they played it on cable in the States. Cause I saw this 2 or 3 times as a kid growing up in the 90s, and every time mortified by it. It's lived long in my memories apparently, because having watched it this time, I remembered every beat and every plot point. So I may have watched it more times than I care to remember. And so I am a Nintendo kid. I grew up, my first console was the Nintendo. I think I've had every iteration of the Game Boy except for the Micro. I've had every Nintendo console except for the Virtual Boy, and I loved Mario as a kid. My family even has a Player's Choice 10 Nintendo cabinet, which was an arcade cabinet that had a bunch of different NES games in it. So like Nintendo was my jam, especially as a kid growing up in the 90s. And I have such a good relation with Mario, and this movie just takes it all away.
Okay.
From time to time. But going back and watching this 30 some years removed, at least 25 years removed, I can appreciate it more for what it is. I always forget it is the first video game movie, and cause for some reason I always feel like Street Fighter came out before it, but it didn't.
No, it came out the year after, 1994.
And, everyone loves Wing Commander from 1999. So clearly, yeah, that's my relationship with the movie is saw it as a child, thought it was an abomination, clearly watched it many times because I remember it very clearly. So it's either emotional scarring or I watched it a lot and repressed that memory.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Craig, do you have a similar relationship? What's your relationship?
So yeah, I had a Nintendo as well. I played Mario. I remember, so I saw it wouldn't have been in theaters, but I probably, watched it on VHS after it came out. I remember, not watching it this time. I won't talk about that yet, but thinking about it as a kid, because I was a big Luigi fan over Mario. And so I remember it being like, oh yeah, this is kind of Luigi's more of this main character instead of, just constantly the Mario sidekick. And I liked that part from what I remembered. But I was probably the opposite of Brandon in the sense of I felt like I watched it a lot when I was a kid, renting it, but watching it this time, I did not recall any of it except like the mud part, the mud bath. I was like, oh yeah, the mud bath. And then them jumping with the boots. And then was it Mario doing the dance with, was it Bertha?
Big Bertha.
Club? Like I remember that. And then everything else is just, completely new and fresh. It felt like, but it was, and I know we'll talk about it more, but it was interesting this time, especially for how complex the storyline is for a Mario game, which is pretty cut and dry. The princess gets taken. He goes to save her. In this, they throw in all of this lore and parallel dimensions and which I know we'll get into, so I won't talk more about it.
For sure we'll get into that. I think the funny thing is, right, I'm not as much of I'm certainly not as much of a gamer as you, Brandon. And although I will say that I did have some friends when I was very young who got because they'd been in Japan, they got the Game Boy early. So a few months before it came out in the UK. So I was born in 1985, and so Super Mario was one of the very first games I played. I don't know when I played it, but I played it sometime in 1990, maybe before my 5th birthday. So that was one of the very first. So I do have like a connection to Mario, and I always enjoyed the Mario games. Although really, like, my kind of time of gaming is that, is like the 90s, and I have very fond memories of Super Mario Land on the Game Boy and the Super Mario games on the SNES and Mario 64, and then like I think like up to the GameCube. I think that's about as far as we got, and then like obviously my brother was a much bigger gamer and he continued onwards, but that's kind of where I stopped. But with the movie, I remember I rented it. I definitely didn't see it in theaters, so presumably I saw it in like 94. And then, yeah, I didn't think it was amazing. It was never like one of my childhood favorites or anything, but I don't remember thinking it was an abomination. I remember kind of enjoying it, and I watched it a few times after that. So that's kind of my relationship to both the game and the movie itself. And I think I was more like, I think I'm kind of, we've perfectly synced up, because I think I'm kind of in the middle. I remembered a number of the set pieces, but like the overall beat by beat story was all a jumble. And there's definitely lots of things that I totally forgot about, which we'll get into. But so we've all perfectly synced up. Brandon remembers pretty much everything. I remember about half the movie. Craig remembers almost nothing. So
I will say that what I remember most is actually, which it's very present nowadays with, as we know, of like toxic fandom and things like that. This being one of the first times of telling somebody when I was younger, probably middle school, that, oh yeah, I liked the Mario movie, and they got very upset about because they were Mario fans, and so that was, I think, my first experience. Your first that type of
your first-hand experience with toxic fandom before it even had that name.
I'm glad to fill that role today. No, I will say on this rewatch, I noticed a lot more. Like, I understood more of the references and like what they adapted into their own version of the lore. Yeah. Whereas as a kid, I was just like, this isn't Mario.
Yeah, no, that's very true. But because it's essentially, they seem to be drawing very heavily from the Wizard of Oz. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of Mario and Luigi in the Wizard of Oz. There's even a bit in the movie where John Leguizamo says like, "Oh, looks like we're not in Brooklyn no more." Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, we get it. Like Wizard of Oz influence. Yeah. Got you.
Well, you even have, was it Spike and Iggy, who are almost like the Scarecrow. They get a brain, and then you have Toad, and yeah, that makes sense.
They did Toad dirty in this too.
Yeah,
yeah, for sure they did. That's
and the Goombas. Oh, I may turn into the toxic fan today, so I'm going to rely on you two to.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Brandon guest starring as toxic fandom.
Title card.
Well, I mean, there isn't a lot of kind of Super Mario Brothers material in the Super Mario Brothers film, but it does start with the theme tune. Oh, actually, before we get into this is an interesting thing, right? Because I think this is not a good movie. However, I don't think it's one of the worst movies of all time, as sometimes it crops up in those lists. Because, like, if you think this is one of the worst movies of all time, you've not seen enough movies, particularly exploitation movies, shot on video movies. But also, like, I don't think this is the worst video game adaptation. I've come up with a list of video game movies, a short list, not a complete list, because I think there's more, of video game movies. I think this film is better than, but these films have higher IMDb scores. So here we go. Oh. So Super Mario Brothers has an IMDb score of 4.1. Wing Commander has an IMDb score of 4.3.
Wow. Really?
Tekken has an IMDb score of 4.8. Tekken. DOA, Dead or Alive, has a score of 4.8. There is some cheesy fun to be had with Dead or Alive, but also, like, it's a terrible film.
Jamie Presley was in it.
Yeah, James Presley was. Devon Aoki's very good in it. Like, you know, she's been done dirty many times. Sorry, Devon Aoki.
Many times.
You know, she's so good, but like, just give her better parts, man. Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Doom 5.2. Right?
Oh.
And then, now we get into the truly outrageous. Max Payne 5.3. And Hitman, a truly ridiculous 6.2. So there we go. I don't know about you guys, but I think all of those movies are worse than Super Mario Brothers.
The weird thing about that, there's a through line with all the movies that you picked, except for Tekken. I don't remember who's in Tekken. But other than Tekken, like, there are like actors in those movies that have a big enough fan base to draw out people to say, oh, it's better than it should be.
Yeah, I know. I guess, yeah, Tekken doesn't really have any big stars. I mean, if you're an MMA fan, I think Kung Lee's in that movie. He was an MMA guy who was popular for a while. And if you're a fan of kind of direct-to-video action of the 90s, the British action legend that is Gary Daniels plays Brian Fury in that film. But again, you know, like, that's only if you're invested in kind of direct-to-video action.
Max Payne had Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, that's true.
I already mentioned the DOAs. Wing Commander had both Freddie Prinze Jr. and
Matthew Lillard.
Matthew Lillard. What was the other one?
Hitman had Timothy Olyphant.
Yeah. Well, wasn't Hitman played by... Was it Timothy Olyphant?
Timothy Olyphant in the first one. I've picked the first one.
I'm thinking Agent 47.
Agent 47's the guy from Homeland, Rupert.
Yeah.
I can't remember his surname. But yeah, it's Timothy Olyphant in the first one.
Oh, wow. I didn't completely forgot about that.
Yeah. Way back in 2007. And yeah, and obviously Doom has The Rock and Carl Urban.
Yeah.
Who are good in it, but like the rest of the movie around them's terrible.
Right. Yeah, it was a CGI mess.
So I just wanted to get that out of my system because I was like, I think that like it's not a good film, but like I think we're slightly doing it dirty to like put it in kind of worst film lists and also like give it lower scores than a bunch of that shit. It also has lower scores than all 6 Resident Evil films, which have surprisingly high scores, but yeah, we'll get off that and we'll go into the film.
I agree with Brandon though, where if Super Mario, a movie like that came out today, I think it would probably do better because of the way fans are. Since it was the first video game adaptation, I don't think it. Yeah, I don't know. It was probably the same environment that.
It would have been different, and I think that like nerddom was like much smaller back then. Because like I remember growing up in the 90s that before video games kind of was the biggest medium in the world, like in the 90s, like video games was just played by nerds, and now like everybody plays video games. It doesn't matter if you're like a geek or a jock or, you know, whatever, you know, a metalhead, it doesn't matter like what kind of subculture, or if you're in a subculture, kind of subcultures don't really exist now because everybody just exists in their own kind of mashup of cultures. So I guess like time is very different now. But anyway, back to my point. Yeah. It was much more.
Yeah. So you're saying we're living in the post-Wii, post-Angry Birds world where everyone has access to like mobile games and everyone had a Wii console, and we're also post-emoji. We're in a post-emoji movie world. So
I guess so.
If you could make a plot out of that,
I guess that's fair.
Plot out of anything.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And they do
not that you should.
No, not that you necessarily should. They do attempt to make a plot out of this. And yeah, as I was going to say, that even though it doesn't have a lot of Super Mario Brothers content in the Super Mario Brothers movie, it does at least start with the theme tune. So yeah, there's that.
And then much graphics dinosaur.
Yeah.
Is what I have for my notes.
Yes.
With narration by Homer Simpson himself.
Yeah. I think as we kind of discussed a little bit off air, there's some like pretty decent talent kind of behind this movie. Alan Silvestri is the composer of the score, who did like the Back to the Future films. Dean Semler is the cinematographer, and he did like Mad Max 2, and had only a couple of years before won the Oscar for Dances with Wolves. It's produced by Roland Joffe, who directed a couple of, kind of critically acclaimed dramas in the 80s, like The Killing Fields and The Mission. So, both behind the camera and on screen, there's a lot of talent here.
No, I agree. And I think because I was reading up on what they were planning on doing initially, was they wanted to give it a feel of like a more modern day, modern for the time, Abbott and Costello or Laurel and Hardy, which I think if they leaned more into that, maybe would have held up better or would have enjoyed it more but because there are points like, you could have just made this a little more slapsticky or added more comedy.
I think there is
but for some reason it's heartfelt at this part and it feels weird.
I think I
feel like that would add more whiplash.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of tonal confusion because there was a lot of scripts. So the original script was written by a British comedy writing duo, Dick Clement and Ian LaFreniere, who it probably won't be known to you, but like co-wrote successful British sitcoms like Porridge and Whatever Happened to the Little Lads, amongst other things. Although apparently their script wasn't like a comedy script. Apparently it was actually much more dramatic, and is the script that brought Bob Hoskins and Fiona Shaw and Dennis Hopper onto the project. And then that script was entirely thrown out. and then we got this script that we actually got, which I think was initially written by Parker Bennett and Terry Runt, and then had script rewrites from Ed Solomon, who obviously changed it enough that he got a writing credit as well. Apparently there was like rewrites on sets, and apparently there was a point where there was so many rewrites and the directors were doing some rewrites as well. And at a certain point, the actors kind of started ignoring the rewrites. So there's a lot of tonal confusion because of that. And also because there was a fight between the directors and the producer about like what tone they wanted the film to be. The directors wanted a darker tone, and Roland Joffe, the producer, wanted like a more family-friendly comic tone. So that's why it's kind of a bit of a mess in terms of its tone.
Yeah, I think that's been was my biggest issue watching, is that it just should have been one or the. I don't know. Yeah. I guess the tone is the tone, and then trying to make a bigger world than it needed to be. It was just. There's a lot of stuff in this movie.
Yeah, there is. But
they could have been cut, I guess.
Just because you mentioned Abbott and Costello, Craig, the one thing that made me really laugh as a kid, and still made me laugh when I rewatched it, is the Abbott and Costello routine they do at the police station, where he goes like, "What's your first name? Mario. What's your second name? Mario. What's your first name? Luigi. What's your surname? Mario. How many Marios are there? 3. Mario, Mario, Luigi, Mario." That's a classic kind of Abbott and Costello type kind of routine right there.
I recently got a question correct. The only person that got a question correct, or the question correct, at a pub trivia thing, where they asked, "What is Mario's surname?" And I was like, "From the non-canon movie?" And the guy's like, "Well, there's other sources." I'm like, "No, they did not. They only say it in the non-canon movie. Is that what we're asking?" And he's like, "Yes." And so I was the only one that knew it was Mario. Everyone else is like generic Italian last names. I'm like, is that racist to do? Just assume Mario has an Italian last name. Are we gonna? Do you remember the stories about Bob Hoskins being drunk?
Yes.
For the entire movie? Are we bringing that up later?
We can bring it up now. Yes. So Bob Hoskins, I suppose to kind of tee this up for you, you can talk about it a bit further, but to kind of tee this up for you, I was going to just read out a little quote from Bob Hoskins, just to kind of give you an idea of what Bob Hoskins kind of thought about the production and how happy he was. I thought I had the quote teed up If you want to talk about the drinking now, I'll find the quote in just a second.
So, from what I remember, the cast and the crew knew that they were working on a bad movie. And both John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins admitted that they drank whiskey in between takes as a coping mechanism. And that also led to Bob Hoskins getting his finger broken because Leguizamo was driving the van in one of the takes, and the van door slammed on his finger. But the only reason, like, I never noticed it as a kid. I really didn't notice it much watching this movie, how drunk he is, except for the fact that there are 3 or 4 times throughout the movie where they clearly ADR'd what he was saying in a scene. Yeah. Like straight up dubbed had him redo his line where you could see his lips flapping completely different from what he's saying. And I just assumed that was because he was so drunk he didn't remember what his lines were and didn't care anymore.
I probably didn't care as well, like you said. So I have found the quote that I was scrabbling to find a minute ago. So it says, in a 2011 interview with The Guardian, Bob Hoskins described the film's production. It was a fucking nightmare. The whole experience was a nightmare. It had a husband and wife team directing whose arrogance had been mistaken for talent. After so many weeks, their own agent told them to get off the set. Fucking nightmare. Fucking idiots.
That's the quote I remember. Yeah.
So, yeah, Bob Hoskins, not a fan of the film. It said it's the worst film he ever made, although apparently his son Jack likes the film. So
he was on because up until that point, I think he had a pretty good streak. I want to say it was like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I know before that he had Mona Lisa. I want to say he had I don't know.
Hook.
Hook was in 91.
Hook was 91. And like, while, because I'm 37 years old, I have childhood nostalgia for that. I think the majority of people think that that's one of Spielberg's worst films.
Well, I like it too.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, no, I think we're all of the correct age. Like, there's like, I think it's one of those things that we can't separate from our own nostalgia. I think there's a very slim slither of people from their early to late 30s who like that film, and then everybody else is like,
So I would challenge that because, or I would challenge those people because, I had to look it up for a quote. We did a Quotely 90s on the Insanely Dangerous Retropod show and did Hook for that. And I had to look the clip up to get the quote for the audio. And I ended up just watching like 5 or 6 clips of Robin Williams being Peter Pan. And I'm like, this is amazing. Robin Williams is a great actor. I haven't gone back and watched the whole movie. So that might be the contention point, but the moments where Robin Williams is embracing himself as Peter Pan are fantastic. Go watch those clips on YouTube. You will, your childhood heart will swell.
And yeah, and Spielberg's worst stuff is anything he's done in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Meaning his lazy, or his safe, whatever he's doing now.
I don't know. I mean, like his latest film, The Fabelmans, has got like a lot of good reviews. So
but no one saw it.
I don't know. I haven't seen it either. I'm just aware it got a lot of good reviews.
Yeah. I heard it's just very safe.
Okay.
Or it's, something that, maybe somebody else should have done a movie about his life.
Possibly. I don't know. I will say though, of latter day, Spielberg, Bridge of Spies is great. Came out in 2015. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
So.
You mean 8 years ago now?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what he's made after, to be honest. I've not like closely followed Spielberg's film. Like, he's made some sort of good stuff in the 2010s. Like, I really, some people think it's boring. I really enjoyed Lincoln. I think Daniel Day-Lewis is great.
West Side Story.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I never watched that. But like, I'm not a big musical fan. Maybe it's great for musical fans. I don't know. Like, I can't really judge that film because I'm like not into like classic traditional musicals. So like, it's hard for me to be like, I might watch it and think, oh, that's not so good. But that's coming from a place of like, I'm not really into classic traditional musicals. So I don't know.
I think it was another case of it was a good movie, just no one went out and
Apparently so, yeah. It got decent reviews. Again, it was just not a film that interested me. So like it's hard to judge its quality. But anyway, we're talking about Super Mario Brothers. We're not talking about
So the opening.
Well, this one ties in Ready Player One.
Right. Yeah. That was very divisive. Apparently, I've not seen it. Apparently, I've not seen anything Spielberg's made since Bridge of Spies.
I'm just going to be a cliche and say the book was better.
Okay, cool.
Speaking of things that the source material that were better, Super Mario.
You brought us back. You brought us in, Brandon. Well done.
I can do it. That's what I'm here for.
That is what you're there for. You know, you can't just.
I take us on wild tangents and bring us right back.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. So we learn that 65 million years ago, potentially an asteroid hit the Earth. And when it did, instead of killing the dinosaurs, it created a parallel dimension where dinosaurs lived and evolved into exactly human-looking dinosaurs, I guess. Yep. And then the human world kept going. And that brings us to basically it's then 20 years prior to the events of the movie, where a woman is carrying an egg. Well, yeah, I just spoiled it. Whatever. Carrying a case that has something in it.
Which is an egg.
Which is an egg. And she drops it off in front of a church.
Yes. And then we
just kind of cliche scenes.
And then she gets chased and we discover that Samantha Mathis is her own mother. So plot twist.
Well, that's asexual reproduction is a thing that dinosaurs do, and reptiles do.
I guess. So like, fair enough.
So it makes sense she would have all the same DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though she has a father.
Yes, apparently she does have a father. Yeah. So doesn't really. We shouldn't dive into the logic of this too much.
A baby hatches from an egg.
Anyway, baby hatches from an egg. None's surprised. But not that surprised. Just kind of like, that's interesting. I didn't expect that. Plot twist. But like, and then they just like raise the baby.
Themselves.
You would think that like, they would think it was something evil or something and cast the baby out or something. Right. But like, no, they just get on with it. And apparently in this universe, it's, she was brought up in a nice nunnery. Not one of those bad ones you hear about in those other movies. Nice nunnery.
Like the Sound of Music.
She was brought up in a nunnery in Brooklyn, but has no Brooklyn accent, unlike everybody else in the movie. Or at least attempting to try and have a Brooklyn accent.
That is true. We have some very broad Brooklyn accents. Some of them are hilarious. Like, I don't know how many of the, we'll get to it, but like of the other women who are kidnapped by Iggy and Spike, who are referred to as the Brooklyn Babes. Like in the credits, like I'm not just being a perv and making it up. Like that's a name. Yeah, some of them have like some real broad accents, and I don't know if because sometimes it's weird. Because I've noticed this with like Scottish people and other people that sometimes the person is from the place that they're supposed to be from, but then because they want to make the audience aware that they're really, really from that place, they get that person to like beef up their accent to make audiences aware. Like, so sometimes Scottish people put on like an extra Scottish accent and you're like, that seems over the top. So maybe they are from Brooklyn and they've just been directed to be like, be as Brooklyn as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess the queen or her mother is going to go back to what we find out to be the other world, but is attacked by King Koopa, and she's able to kind of seal off the portal between the two worlds. And then
is that what happened? I was so confused.
Yeah, because I know they said the portal wasn't open back up again until the real estate guy
Scapatelli
came in and yes, he came in and tried to disrupt everything by messing up the water.
But that means it was open before?
I guess so. Yeah. It was open if you had so
if you had the stone.
Don't go into this trying to make sense of it.
I know. Because it's all suddenly hitting me because like he was in the storm tunnel, but they said they couldn't cross over later in the movie.
I think because she had the stone, and if you follow the person immediately, you can get through the wall. But like something like that.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay,
Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
I was about to spiral.
Yes,
no problem. And then like this is quite interesting because like I feel that often when we do these movies, I make a lot of notes for the first act, and then it kind of starts to slow down, and then like I take very little notes by the end of the movie. But this is kind of almost a reverse. It's quite slow to start in a sense. We get like, we're setting up the characters and we're kind of doing this and that. And like most of the action kind of ends up in the third act. It gets quite frantic. I made much more notes in the kind of last 35-ish minutes than I did like the first like hour and 5 kind of thing. I don't know if you felt that.
They add a lot. Same. I mean, they add a lot in as it goes on, but they tried. But another question that was brought up was it just because Bob Hoskins was cast as Mario? Is that why they didn't have Peach, or because why didn't they just do Peach instead
Daisy?
of Daisy?
I'm not sure about that at all. Like, because most of the other characters are the name. You know, we got Mario, Luigi, and Koopa, and Toad, which we'll discuss further, and Yoshi, and everybody else has got the same. So I don't know why they switched from Peach to Daisy.
Well, because traditionally Daisy is shipped with Luigi.
Oh, okay.
Luigi.
Okay, I see.
Seemed to be the driving force.
Okay, so it's helpful. It's helpful to have Toxic Fandom on the podcast. So you can tell us tell us Mario facts.
Yeah. Daisy's the brown hair princess from the Mario games. So just to be perfectly clear, Princess Daisy was introduced in Super Mario Land, which is the first Game Boy game, Mario Game Boy game from 1989. She is the princess of Sarasa Land. But yeah, people know her more from like Mario Kart Double Dash and Mario Tennis now.
Excellent. Thank you, Toxic Fandom.
You're welcome.
So we're in modern day in Brooklyn, and we meet Luigi, who is just watching kind of like those Unsolved Mystery or one of the strange, type shows that talk about the Bat Boys or, the stuff that we would have been used to, I guess, of the 90s that were really popular, but I don't know. Is that still a thing?
I don't think so. I think that's very much a 90s thing. The one thing I did want to highlight from this scene, because I thought it was funny, was like Mario gives a dig at the New York Post. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. Just basically saying that you can't believe anything you read in the New York Post because it's trash.
I liked how they had plungers. On the wall,
that is good
on display.
They're so like throughout the movie, and we'll discuss it further because plumbing saves the day on a number of occasions. They're so proud, or specifically Mario is so proud to be a plumber. It is obviously the greatest vocation that anybody could have. That's no offense to plumbers. It's, we need plumbers in the world. We probably need more actually because they're low on the ground and can charge a fortune because of that. So no, it's good, but like it is funny how it's portrayed in this movie. Like, cause I don't think that most plumbers, it's their whole identity in the same way that it is Mario's in this film.
The 90s, the early 90s was still the time when their identities were their jobs until we learned from the movie Brink, Disney Channel original movie Brink, that your job isn't who you are.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's very true. So no, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Up until this time, up until this era, obviously, you just wore your job and you just wore your plumber gear all the time or whatever you may be. I think I don't know what you think of this section of the movie. Basically, it's fairly straightforward. We're trying to set up the characters, who they are. Luigi's a bit of a conspiracy nut. Mario is quite grumpy, but also quite cheerful at the same time. Very proud of being a plumber. Daisy is very kind of, she's a bit of an activist and you know, like, and also like a paleontologist who is kind of weirdly ashamed of being a paleontologist because like on their date with Luigi, so it's like, whoa, you think this is interesting? And I was like, I mean, you studied it, women. You're like, I mean, why?
What is wrong? What is wrong with Luigi and Daisy? Like, so they meet Daisy as she's doing excavation just outside the Brooklyn Bridge because they found dinosaur bones, and she's like the head person for NYU's students excavators. Even
though she's only 20 or something.
Yeah, she's 20, so she'd be a junior going into her senior year maybe. But and somehow she runs into the Mario brothers and ends up on a double date with Mario and his girlfriend and Luigi, and then they go walking home and they have this whole conversation about how like Luigi's like, I'm so uninteresting, and Daisy's like, I'm such a weirdo, haha. And just like, where's the self-confidence?
Yeah, no, they're both very anxious people. Like that's, I mean, both of them need therapy. I think, I guess we should note, because you were talking about that quiz you were at where people were guessing stereotypical Italian names. We should note that they go on a double date at the most stereotypical Italian restaurant that anybody has ever been at.
And I really liked Mario's line. Also, I think Daisy says something to the extent of, there used to be dinosaurs here. Yeah. And Mario's like, there used to be Dodgers here too. And I apologize for whatever accent that was. But I was like, oh, that's funny because New York.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, the LA Dodgers used to be the New York Dodgers baseball team.
So this movie feels like, because I know it happens a lot in Michigan, if there's a movie set in Detroit, it's like, oh, to make this a Detroit movie, all you need to do is throw in a Motown reference and like a reference to GM or Ford, and that's good. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit at all. And that's what this feels like, where they're like, let's just throw in a couple New York references throughout, and that's enough.
I think that's very much the case. Although New York tends to be a bit more, because there tends to be more filmmakers from New York making films in New York, so it tends to feel more authentic. But obviously, this is a movie produced by a Brit and directed by Brits, and you know, so the script by Americans, but like maybe from LA, I'm not sure.
So Daisy is being kind of tracked down by Spike and Iggy, who have got through the portal, even though it was closed down.
Apparently Scafatelli's Scafatelli's work in the tunnel that he's trying to do has created a schism that has let them enter the world. But I don't know why they can't just invade en masse, like until the princess, they get the princess and the thing with the rock, and
because it says they need the stone to get through, but then how did they get through if she had the stone?
Apparently, maybe it can only fit two at a time until they get the stone, and then they can come in en masse and invade.
Okay. Yep. If they reunite the stones, they can merge the two worlds instead of just sacrificing the old one, I guess is the idea he keeps saying.
Yep. I mean, that's perfectly. I mean, I think we're actually putting more thought into this than the screenwriters, but like,
so Spike and Iggy they're supposed to be like a kind of the slapstick duo. They're bumbling henchmen, and that's their whole thing. They don't even really know what she looks like at one point. Then they do. But then Mario's girlfriend comes out and they're like, she must be in a disguise.
We should mention that apparently, because they descended from dinosaurs, that they can only recognize other dinosaur people. They can't, all mammals look the same to them. So apparently they're kind of racist as well. So apparently that's why they keep kidnapping the wrong person.
Even though they look exactly like humans.
I know
fun.
it's very confusing, but it's mentioned in the film. They says, "Oh, I can't recognize one mammal from another," or something.
I couldn't tell if that was like because they were stupid or because
Partly
of,
both, I think, maybe
genetics. So in the video game lore, Iggy Koopa is one of the 7 Koopaling children from Super Mario Brothers 3 and Super Mario Brothers World.
Mm-hmm.
Or Super Mario World, sorry. And Spike is not actually related to Bowser, but is what's a green like thing that has a spike ball that comes out of his mouth and throws at people. So that's your fun toxic fact.
Oh, great. Mario Facts, sponsored by Namely 90s.
Mario Facts.
Replacing our previous segment, Brandon's Geography Corner.
And they're
adjacent. They're adjacent segments. Yeah, okay. Brandon's Geography Corner might come back. So yeah, okay.
It might.
Anyway, Craig.
And they're cousins. They're cousins to the King Koopa, who they're loyal to him until they
weren't
on it until they get evolved. Then apparently they haven't been loyal to him the whole time.
Right.
Within the script. But
just so I know we're skipping forward, but I just, in terms of like the nonsensical logic of this film, was anybody else entertained by the fact that when Iggy and Spike, their brains are made advanced, as opposed to their small lizard brains that they have at the start of the movie, that even once they've become advanced, they're still idiots. They just have a larger vocabulary.
Yeah. Like it was an immediate turnaround. Like they're like intelligent and then suddenly stupid again.
Yeah. Then they don't know how to drive their car on their world. Know right from left.
Straight off a cliff into a mud bank. Before we get too far away from the part of the movie before it gets crazy, there's a line that where Daisy's talking about the dinosaur bones. Like she takes Luigi back to her dig site for some reason, and she's like, "I just think they're so beautiful." And then Luigi goes, "You're beautiful." I cannot count how many times I've used that line, and holy crap, it's because of this movie.
Oh, okay.
Darn you, Luigi.
See, so you did get something from the film. You thought it was an abomination, but subconsciously, part of you liked it.
Yes. And on to Brandon's Geography Corner. We find that Scapitelli's men, was it Scapitelli?
Scapitelli, I believe is his name.
Scapitelli, who is also a rival plumbing service on top of being a land magnet or whatever. They break the water in the tunnel to try to flood it so that they can get back to building whatever giant building they're doing to ruin all the fossils. So Luigi and Daisy are in the tunnel and they're like, "Oh, we could fix this." Or Luigi's like, "I know how to fix this." Daisy says, "Thank God you're a plumber," and whatever. So it cuts to them back at Luigi and Mario's apartment, grabbing Mario and bringing him back to the tunnel. Tunnel should be flooded by that point.
Yeah, for sure.
They're by the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm sure they're not too far. They don't live too far from the place, but they had to walk to and from the place. This is the best I could do for my Geography Corner.
No, it's all right. It's all right. No, I agree that probably the tunnel bit should be flooded, but we've got bigger fish to fry. There's bigger plot holes. There's more nonsensical logic that we have to deal with. So we need to skate past that. But like, yeah, no, you're entirely correct. And I double checked. I was wrong. It's not Scapitelli. It's just Scapelli. So
Scapelli, like the noodle.
Oh, on top of that, Spike and Iggy, they take Mario's girlfriend, thinking that she is Daisy, and apparently several women from Brooklyn have been taken.
As we discussed earlier, the Brooklyn Babes.
Yeah. And anyways, so they are fixing it. They get knocked out by Spike and Iggy, and they wake up pretty quick after to hear Daisy yelling for Luigi, which they yell back and forth a lot throughout this movie.
I was impressed by that comeback, I have to say. Like, they got knocked out by like a pair of spanners, and like they woke up pretty much immediately. Like it was, I mean, they weren't even down for a 10 count, you know? That was like a 3 count, and they were back up and ready to run.
Yeah. And so they go through this whole cavern and they find that she's yelling to them through basically rock, but this rock then turns into sand and her face comes through, and she comes through enough that Luigi's able to get the stone that she always wears that was left to her when she was a baby. And then they decide Luigi now is willing to take all these kind of leaps of faith and do all this stuff. And so he jumps through, and so does Mario. So now they're in this other world. And that is it in a nutshell.
And that's the first 10 minutes of this movie. No.
Yeah, we probably need to go through the rest of it a bit quicker. That's to be said. We'll be here all day. But there's so much to talk about in terms of like the non-logical nonsense that is in this movie. But a lot of it's like quite fun. And one thing that I will say in the movie's favor is when you're watching like them go through the wall and all that stuff like that, and some of the effects later as well, like for effects that are like digital effects that are like 30 years old, they're not awful. It's not like watching Spawn or something, where you're like, wow. Mind you, I guess Spawn was kind of even bad for the time, but like it's maybe not a good comparison, but like, no, for the time, like it's pretty advanced.
Yeah, I feel like it was 50-50. There are times where it was like, wow, that could hold up today, and then there are times where it was like, that kind of looks like Spawn.
Yeah,
maybe more 60-40, good to bad, but it wasn't. There were some CG points where I was like, not great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably a fair assessment.
But I guess I'm the toxic fan here. That's the role I play.
Bring up toxic fandom. What did you make of the production design of Dino Hatton, which was done by David L. Snyder, who did the same production design for Blade Runner, and he's really made it look like Blade Runner.
Really? Yeah. It looked very much like Blade Runner.
Well, when you said that they did Max Headroom.
Oh, the directors, yes.
Then it clicked for me. I was like, oh, okay. So that makes sense. Like seeing their world and everything like that. Yeah.
I mean, but it definitely had Blade Runner feels to it. It definitely had like 89 Batman, like Tim Burton era Batman kind of dystopian vibes. I did like that there was a thwomp bar, thwomp being the brick enemies that try to smash you.
Oh, right. That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. I didn't pick that up, but that's pretty good.
It's just a sign. There's a sign, you can blink and you miss it.
Yeah. Talking about blink and you miss it signs, there's like weird like adult things in the movie for like a family friendly film. Like when they first go to Dino Hatton, as it's called, there's like a cinema, and what's playing at the cinema was I Was a Teenage Mammal XXX. Yeah. And I was like, what?
Classic kids movie.
Indeed. And throughout the movie, like, Mario is something of a Lothario. People seem very attracted to Mario. Not that Bob Hoskins is an ugly man, but it's interesting. And, there's a surprising amount of sexual energy in the film this kind of happened with another movie we were talking about from 1993 some time back. The Three Musketeers, which is, that film is on heat. That's ridiculous.
Horny. Yeah.
But this movie definitely has a surprising amount of sexual energy for something that's aimed at kids.
Yeah, I was surprised, especially once we get to the dance sequence. I was very surprised.
Is this a good time to bring up? Bob Hoskins was 49, John Leguizamo was 32, and Samantha Mathis was the closest to her character's age at 22.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of adds up. Most 90s action films, most 90 films, I think, but the ones that we've covered, quite often the female romantic lead is like 10 years younger than like the person they're paired with, so that kind of adds up. The difference between Leguizamo and Hoskins is kind of funny, but I guess that's possible. But then usually that happens in like bigger families, the age differences like that. rather than like.
Well, there's the little comment made about what their parents passing.
Yeah.
And Bob Hoskins, him kind of being where he says, "Oh, and he had to be my mother," and that's the joke. And, he's more like my father or whatever.
Yeah. So
I guess that was them trying to solve it.
So Luigi was a mistake?
Yeah, one of them was an accident because of Ray.
Yeah, but because he seems to not know them, so it seems like both parents died like almost immediately after he was born.
But also,
we're in Dino Hatton. We meet Toad, who is a busker.
That's a ways. We meet Big Bertha before.
Oh,
that.
right, yeah, I guess so. I'm skipping past some things, but yes, okay, right. We are. There's an attempted mugging by an old lady, which is quite a funny sequence. And Big Bertha steals the rock, and then is that after that?
Big Bertha being the Mario enemy, Big Bertha, who is a giant fish that tries to eat you, but the red giant cheep, but in this movie is just a large black woman wearing red leather.
Yeah.
And owns a nightclub, maybe? Question mark?
I thought she was a bouncer, but then she's
okay.
They make some comment.
I think,
about, oh, that's probably Big Bertha, who is the bouncer
Boom
at the
Boom Club.
Yeah.
Boom Boom also being a Mario enemy. We are also introduced to Dennis Hopper's King Koopa. And my note for this is Dennis Hopper ellipsis, that is all.
Yeah.
So, and we get a plumber alert for the plumber.
Yes, to arrest them. Actually, you see Dennis Hopper, that is all. That's not quite all, I don't think. What did you make of whether this was in the script or whether they stopped caring about the script and just made their own choices? What did you make of Dennis Hopper as King Koopa throughout the movie? And I specifically want you to talk about the decision he made to make him a germaphobe.
Oh,
there's a part of me that feels like that was an acting choice by him, and then they just rolled with it because of the way it's done. But
I think it makes sense in the movie because he doesn't like the fungus, and he knows the fungus is the previous Mushroom King.
But he doesn't like to touch anything. Yeah. He has a hanky over the phone that he uses. He doesn't want to shake Mario's hand. He's there's lots of things. He's obviously quite severely germophobic.
He does all the mud stuff though.
He does, yeah. And he does make a point to say that their world is covered in fungus and he hates the fungus, or he hates how dirty their world is. So he's looking forward to getting back to Earth with clean air, the clean Manhattan, Brooklyn air.
I was just about to say the famously clean New York air.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say his decision to do T-Rex arms halfway through the movie for the entire rest of the movie.
I guess. Because I think that's to signify when we get the scene where they slightly devolve him, but don't fully devolve him. Like, he's got more of his T-Rexiness back because he's taken a step back. Yeah. So, I think that was my assumption that's why he did that, because
that makes more sense now.
Like after the scene where they escape, where Toad gets de-evolved into a Goomba, and then he gets, for some reason they put him back, but like it doesn't like devolve him to what is put on the little dial. I don't know, like, cause surely it should like just devolve him back into like being like a T-Rex, but like it just gives him more T-Rex energy, and there's like a flash of T-Rex in his eyes kind of thing. So I don't know how, anyway, there's lots of things I don't know how it works in this film, to be honest. So maybe we should just skip past. And
like for example,
you're right. You brought up Toad. He's a musician. He has a swirl pattern shaved into his hair to kind of look like a mushroom, but not like his mushroom hat. And then they all get arrested, and Toad gets done dirty in this movie, as I said earlier, and he gets turned into a Goomba, which is not the brown thing that you jump on in the Mario games, but something completely terrifying.
So yeah, I was wondering what you both made of this, both as a child and now, because the design of the Goombas, which are these like massive reptilian creatures who wear these massive trench coats that have these massive shoulders, and then they got a tiny little itty bitty head, and they're really creepy looking. And I was looking at it, and every time they were on screen, I wanted to look away because I was like, God, they're just so creepy. And I remember having the same kind of repulsed reaction as a kid. And I was wondering what your guys' take on it was.
I don't know. I just more thought it was strange in terms of the design, I guess. And I don't know. I'm at a loss for it. If they were going to de-evolve and things like it, just again, like so much of it didn't make sense to me.
Craig, we're only just over halfway through the episode, and you're already tapping out. This is a new low for us, to be honest.
I'm with Scott on this one. They are creepy. I hated them as a kid. I hated them now. I think so. In Super Mario World, they changed the Goomba design to be like little round things, which kind of looks like the round-headed ones in the movie, but also they didn't have the body in the game. But so like in my head, they've retconned those to be called Galoombas now, but in my head, that's the design aesthetic they were going for. And then the ones with like the raptor heads were supposed to be more like the Koopas in the Koopa shells, because they had like the beak looking thing going on. So in my head, that's what they were going for. I don't know if that's true or not. Hated it then, hate it now. Every time they try to talk is the worst. And like, it's so unnerving.
Well, it felt like, because the show Dinosaurs would have been, was it still going on at that time, or was it
I think it was like 92 to 95.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
So there's a part of me that kind of had that vibes with it. Like they were trying to make like, oh, this show's popular, and try and make their version, but henchman version of that. I don't know. I think I just always associated those two together.
91 to 94. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, at least those looked like people.
Yeah.
And had proper animatronics. This one was just like their mouths would go wide, and it was the small head. I think it was the small head that always got me.
Yeah, it's the same for me. It's very much the same thing.
And then they still give Toad a harmonica, and he's playing it at points, even though his mouth isn't even touching it. It's
so creepy. So creepy.
I think the next thing I was wanting to talk about is like, basically we've kind of covered like some of the things that are coming up in terms of like Toad being de-evolved into a Goomba, what happens to Koopa, the Mario's escape. We get a bit of a kind of chase sequence, and then they kind of escape via a tunnel that's not fully built, and then they drive off out of the tunnel but are saved by the fungus. So like, one of the kind of mantras of the movie is trust the fungus. But I know that you said that John Leguizamo's like Luigi is a conspiracy theorist, so like he just immediately has like these bizarre logical leaps. But still, I was a little bit kind of like, why does he so immediately trust the fungus, even though he isn't in the end correct?
I mean, at this point, the fungus did try to give them a bomb as they were escaping. And then it did catch them as they were falling to their deaths, essentially, in the police cruiser, which I'd like to point out at one point, Bob Hoskins has the line, "This is driving." 6 years prior to episode 1's, "This is pod racing."
Okay. I will secretly very influential film, Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah. I will also add to that. That's interesting with these cars, because I get the fact that they don't have the resources like gas or whatever. But none of them have brakes. So they're just all smashing into each other. Apparently, they couldn't learn how to install brakes in cars.
No, because like all the cars are like
you just
designed as like kind of demolition derby cars. Like they have like that kind of look about them.
Well, you just wrinkled my brain because I didn't put two and two together that they wouldn't have gasoline because they wouldn't use
Fossils.
the decomposed dinosaur.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That's why they're all running off the electric track type thing going on. Yeah. But Luigi, he's into the supernatural, and he saw the mushrooms, he saw the bomb. It's like the fungus seems semi-sentient, at least. They're in a world of living dinosaurs. There must be things that are different. They jumped through a magical portal with a Doctor Strange style animation, getting them from point A to point B.
Okay. Yeah, you've made your case. We'll give this nonsensical thing a pass.
Don't make me defend this movie.
Well, you've done it successfully. You've successfully defended this plot point, going against your own code of toxic fandom.
Yeah. Yes.
So by this point, we get what I know they talked about wanting to make it like a video game where they have almost goals that they have to set or get to, like you would in a video game. But
Fetch quest.
Yeah, so Spike and Iggy, who are now kind of on their side, but you think they are against them, but they end up saying, well, if you want to get the stone back, we know where it's at, and they're kind of assigned to work together because they want the stone. The Mario Brothers want Daisy, who is now locked up in the tower with the other girls. She realizes she's the princess, gets to meet Yoshi, which is just a velociraptor looking thing. And then Dennis Hopper tries to kiss her, saying that every girl remembers her first time kissing a lizard.
We also get have a nice trip, see you next fall, 2 years prior to Kimberly saying it in the Power Rangers movie.
There you go. And
you're really making a case for this film. It is this film's influence.
So much influence. Daisy looks like she's about to sex the Yoshi because at some point Koopa says Yoshi is of a noble house or something. Like he's somehow related to royalty.
Apparently so.
But he's also de-evolved for some reason.
Yeah, it's something about the Yoshis are always attached to the royal family.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I guess I misheard him.
I don't know. So they have to get the rock. So to get the rock back and to get Daisy, they make basically a truce with Spike and Iggy, and which you think they're going to double cross them, but I mean, no, they end up all good.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
It's at this point in the movie where I got bored and started going through Wikipedia and IMDb because Spike, I was like, I know who that is. He's the valet from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Okay.
That they take the Ferrari in the middle of that. And then, Samantha Mathis was the voice of Krista in Ferngully. I completely forgot about that. The Last Rainforest. And that's how I entered Big Bertha, and Mario dancing together.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, you're not strictly required to watch every second of the movie, So,
I was watching. I just was.
You're just paying half attention. That's okay.
I was also pausing and doing laundry during my watch through. Okay. So,
and it should be noted too that Fisher Stevens is as Iggy.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
which I somehow missed.
I was wondering about that, like in terms of like getting away from the plot for a second, but just for the characters, like what did you make of Iggy and Spike, and also what did you make of Lena, who's played by Fiona Shaw, who's probably most known to people nowadays as Petunia Dursley from the Harry Potter films?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. What was your takes on those characters?
I got the Spike and Iggy were like the bumbling henchmen at first, and then they stayed bumbling even though they had a better vocabulary. But I don't know, it felt like there's this weirdness of that. There's points where they're underutilized, like they're just like their bumbliness, or that they would have made them more silly. I guess that's part of the tone thing that we talked about. But in terms of King Koopa's kind of right hand, I think she was, again, as our ongoing thing, she was underwritten in a way, but then weirdly becomes important of like a villain in her own sense. I thought the same about the Lena character. That like Lena is an underwritten character, but Fiona Shaw's furious scenery chewing performance kind of overcomes that to make her quite an entertaining character. Brandon? Yeah.
She definitely, Fiona Shaw steals not only the show, but the antagonist role, because she's the one that actually unites the meteorite pieces. Sorry, skipping ahead a little bit, or a lot of it, but it's like she has the whole villain turn, and I mean, most of her lines don't pass the Bechdel test, but that's an outdated way of looking at things anyway. You know, the side characters, it was interesting. They're like, it did kind of fragment the movie into different parts. Like, oh, this is Iggy and Spike's little fun mishap, and oh, Big Bertha, she has her own section of the movie, and it turned it into like a fetch quest type thing. But when they are in the scenes, they really do like take focus from the main characters, and it's not a bad thing.
So Shaw, I will say that's even a feat to show to her, the fact that she's able to do scene chewing and take the focus away from somebody like Dennis Hopper, who is the ultimate scene chewer.
That is true. But I don't think that Dennis Hopper's performance here is a scenery chewing performance, but it doesn't feel quite as furious as like 2 years later, where he's the villain in Waterworld, or like some of his other performances. I don't think it ranks as one of his most scenery chewing performances.
Yeah.
He may have taken notes from Fiona Shaw's performance in this for Waterworld.
Yeah, because, I mean, and again, this is skipping ahead, but particularly that kind of end sequence for her character, where she falls off a bridge, gets electrocuted in like in a cartoon style, so like it doesn't like damage you, it just like makes your hair go big. And then, from that point on, like she is completely off the chain in her acting. Like the electrocution made her even more deranged than her character already was, which was pretty fucking deranged. And like she really is, she's kind of the MVP of the film.
Which I like when she gets the rock, after the whole Big Bertha dance and all of that, and she drinks the shot and it shows the worm, and the worm is actually talking. You can kind of hear it going, help me, and she drinks it.
Yeah,
that was one of those little funny moments, I guess.
I mean, that scene kind of doesn't make sense either, because like Big Bertha was like antagonistic towards Mario the first time that they met, towards Mario and Luigi. And then when they meet again in the club, she punches him, and then but then he does some kind of smooth chat up lines, and she's just immediately enamored. Like she's fallen in love in 2 seconds, and it's quite a funny sequence of events.
Yeah, the chat, his smooth pickup is actually he wants her to punch him again, and then she says, "What? Dance with me, and I'll hit you as much as you like," or something like that. And it's like, oh, that's all it took.
I don't know, like Big Bertha was just looking for a kind of sub-dom relationship, and like one came along and that was that. Yeah. Weird sexual energy of this film, as we've discussed.
And the dance goes on for a while between the two of them as he's trying to get the rock, which is in between her breasts, and
we call it cleavage.
Yeah. And there's a whole thing where he puts in his mouth at one point, where he
the dipping.
Yeah, where there's all these different elements that like, oh, for a kids movie.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they're doing this.
But it was also a nice gag for that went on way too long.
Yeah, it was drawn out. Talking about gags that go on for way too long, I think the most random gag that we have is there is like a random cutaway scene where Koopa is ordering a pizza. And then we get notifications about where the pizza's at on another 2 occasions. And I was like, why the hell is this in the film?
Comedy comes in threes.
I know comedy comes in threes. I understand the principle of jokes. I just don't understand why this joke is here. It just doesn't work.
So one of the things that they talk about is that, like, he says, hold the mammal on his pizza, which we don't eat real, traditionally for pizza. We don't have lizard on our pizza or things like that, but they constantly try and relate it in a way that's like, oh, it's like the opposite of here. So we're having lizard hot dogs instead of hot dogs. And
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't have anything for that, but it might be building on it. Instead of controllers, their controllers were guns. Did you notice that?
Oh, yeah.
Like that was a weird design aesthetic.
Yeah.
But their cameras were too.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's right. Cause they take those like mug shots that like have the kind of, like the little sniper dot. So like both Mario and Luigi think they're being executed, but they're actually just getting their photo taken.
Is that because of was it Nintendo that had the Duck Hunter?
Yep, that was Duck Hunt, and they also later on in the movie. So in the climactic battle, or actually any of the de-evolution guns that they had, those were based on the Nintendo Super Scope or the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I'm not a big gamer, but I did know that one. I was like, oh, I recognize that from when I was a kid.
I think it's at that point they finally change into their colored suits.
Yes, we are at the point where they suit up into their traditional red and green suits, and we're kind of getting into the kind of final part of the film. Daisy finds out about her father, and she immediately believes that her father is the fungus and doesn't ask any questions. So that's interesting. Luigi and Daisy really are made for each other in terms of their lack of self-confidence and just their like willingness to just believe anything they're told. So yeah, there's that. And we have a kind of fun kind of platformer sequence where they have to jump some things. Luigi thinks he's flying. He's not. He's just on a hook. Mario nearly dies, but he's saved by the fungus. Once again, trust the fungus. And Koopa's kind of watching on while he's ordering pizza. And then we're kind of getting into the final kind of battle, and we save the Brooklyn Babes. Mario was unaware that Daniela, I think that was her name, or Danielle?
Yeah, Daniela, which, by the way, should have been Pauline.
Okay.
Like the original before Princess Peach woman would have been Pauline. That gets my toxic fandom upset that they're like, oh, we'll do so many references, but Mario's just dating some random girl from Brooklyn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And even though you said, Craig, correctly, that Luigi is kind of the protagonist of the movie, Mario's the much more useful brother, because he saves the day. He saves the Brooklyn Babes. And I did like his line about that he promised to take Daniela to WrestleMania, to amuse me.
Yeah.
So he rescues them, and then he comes down a flume, like a kind of ice pipe.
A mattress bobsled.
On a mattress, and then he knocks out some of the Goombas and kind of knocks over. Does he just knock over some of the Goombas, or does he knock over Koopa as well at that time?
Well, so they come out of the tunnel tubing straight into the street where Luigi and Daisy just happen to be, and they knock over Koopa and some of his Goomba henchmen. Can I just point out? 80 minutes into the film, they introduce a Hail Koopa, Nazi era dictatorship Heil.
Yeah.
I was just like, out of nowhere, and then it's never repeated at any point.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true. As we kind of talked a little bit about before we start recording, this is secretly a Marxist film because Lena mentions that Spike and Iggy were kind of rabble-rousing in the bar against Koopa in a scene that we don't see, but there is a deleted scene of Spike and Iggy doing a rap, which is anti-Koopa. So there's that. And Iggy, Fisher Stevens anyway, he says that Koopa is the oppressor of the proletariat. So it's secretly, I think that's a sign in its favor, secretly leftist movie. And if listeners were not previously aware of my political inclinations, you are now.
Well, so after they're taken to in that scene, you don't see them again, but they're ordered to be executed, but yeah, I don't know if they actually were, or we're just assuming.
Well, don't they escape? Because Daisy.
Oh yeah,
with Daisy.
They escaped. Did you not watch the post-credit sequence?
I didn't watch. No, I know that they escaped now. I remember that because Toad.
They take them. Yeah, they take Daisy to her father, and then they're like, "Peace."
Yeah.
We know when to fold.
Yeah, they're like those who run away live to fight another day. I think is an approximation of what they say.
And then the pizza guy gets pulled off as the mattress bobsled hits Koopa. I guess, right?
Yeah. And then it's amazing. We took about 50 minutes to talk about the first 10 minutes of the movie, but now we're at the final battle somehow. So we've really stepped up our gear.
But then there's still two storylines going on right now. There's Koopa versus Mario. Then there's Luigi, Daisy versus Lena, Mrs. Dursley, and Lena has the crystal after it drops out of Koopa's hands, and she catches it and falls onto an electrical grate or something, but survives.
Yeah, well, as we discussed, just makes her hair bigger, like in all classic slapstick movies or cartoons.
Mm-hmm. Tonal whiplash for sure, because again, she's still the darker villain of the two somehow. She makes a break for the portal cave meteorite thing, followed by Luigi and the girls, Luigi and the girls go to the portal to send all the Brooklyn babes back through, and then she comes into them. Anyway, I want to talk about the Koopa fight.
Okay.
Which is the more important
break down
thing.
the Koopa fight for us, Brandon.
Mario gets the bomb, which he twists and sets in motion at Koopa on the little walkway they're on, and then it immediately falls down the grate onto the street below. And then Koopa starts shooting the super scope at him, or the de-evolution ray or whatever. And there's a long fight. He ends up inside the thing that's suspended over the street, which I don't know what it is. Cement mixer? I don't know, but it's an allusion to Koopa's clown car in Super Mario World. Okay. If you've ever gotten to the end of the game when you face off against Bowser, that's the illusion. And I recognized that as a kid, but like coming back to it at this point, I'm like, that's so dumb.
I do like that everybody happens to know what the bomb is, and they're just all screaming it.
Well, it's a giant bomb. Of course you run.
Yeah.
And at one point, Lena gets the crystal back into the meteorite, and the worlds start to merge, and we get a nice Thanos snap effect 25 years early. And, from the Marvel movies.
No, I'm aware. It's just that, like, because you're breaking down the fight, I was just letting you roll.
Oh, no, But I've been floundering for a few minutes now.
But Lena is killed, and that's why we find out how Daisy was so important. Because Lena kept getting jealous about why he only wanted Daisy, King Koopa, and it's because Daisy is the only one that could merge the two together without basically being killed. And so Lena is incinerated, but her skeleton remains are blasted against the wall.
It's now embedded in the cave wall.
Yeah.
Her human mammal-looking dinosaur skeleton bones.
Yes, not dinosaur.
And Mario, not the whole world, but apparently just Mario and King
and
Koopa,
a handful of Goombas.
Yeah, go back to or end up in Brooklyn for a second.
And Scapelli's like, "Who are you, jokers?" And then he gets devoed
to a monkey.
Yes. And then they get blipped back because Daisy has the power. Daisy, who says, "Only I can enter this," and then drags Luigi into the death circle meteorite thing.
Yeah.
And Luigi goes, "I have just the plumbing tool to get this out." There's a lot of plumbing in this movie. Yeah. I don't think we've discussed it at length, but there's several sequences throughout the movie where plumbing is a major plot point of like, oh, well, I know these pipes. We can switch them up, So at the end of the movie, plumbing saves the day.
And Mario, that's the big kind of thing where he keeps telling Luigi, you got to hold on to your tools, and every tool is important. And that's his, I guess, big character arc, is that Luigi learns that plumbing is important.
The two things that the movie wants us to learn is trust the fungus, and also to always keep your plumbing tools on you, just in case.
Yeah. And third is wear Reeboks, because you could walk up a wall if you're a Babam.
Yes, that's true. I did note. I put that in my notes that the Babam was wearing Reeboks, and I was like, oh, okay. Bit of random product placement there. Well, fair enough.
I love the Babam gag, how he just keeps going.
Oh yeah,
and
it's really drawn out, but it's quite good. Yeah.
I still love it today. I do have to say, did the art department run out of money? Because like clearly that's just like it's like a paper mache bombshell over like just a purchased little wind-up toy. And because you said that all the CG looked good earlier, and I disagreed. I really liked the snap, but when they blipped back, that was pretty bad.
No, I just it was just when they were going through the wall, thought that was all right. When they blipped to Earth, thought that was all right. I don't know if, like, when you see the exterior shot of, like, Dino Hatton, whether that's, like, a digital effect or, like, a matte painting, but, like...
the car hanging from the fungus was pretty impressive.
That's pretty good. Yeah. I think I just noted that there was certain sequences. I didn't think it was all great, and, some of it, looks pretty ropey or whatever, but I just think for a movie that's 30 years old, there's a lot of stuff that looks not awful, not like a lot of times when you're watching a 90s movie where, digital effects are kind of in their infancy, and you're like, wow, okay, that's where we were at back then. There is moments of that, but there's also moments of like, oh, that's kind of advanced for the time, for 1993.
Yeah. Technically pre-Jurassic Park.
I mean, the same year.
Yeah.
And Jurassic Park is slightly different because any film that, like, because a lot of the effects are kind of pure digital here, with the wall and like the blipping back and forth and stuff like that. Whereas most of the effects in Jurassic Park are like a mixture of digital and practical, which makes them look better. Because like, if you do a mixture of digital and practical, it ages better than if you're just doing purely digital, because like that like updates so often.
Very true. So Koopa's devoed
into at first Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That seems like a mistake, but yeah.
Yeah. Then into just the primordial ooze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the moment he pops out of the cement mixer clown car thing as the dinosaur, I'm like, that's from the thing. They did the thing. But yeah, that's how they beat Bowser. He turns into goop.
But apparently the king, when Koopa dies or Bowser dies, the king instantly is evolved again. He doesn't need to be,
which is random.
Yeah, which is really random because all of the Goombas are still Goombas. Like everything, nothing else has re-evolved. So There's no explanation as to the link to why that would be, because apparently it's all been done in a lab and it's not been done by magic. If it had been done by magic, then you could have just been like, magic. That's the answer. But
we've got Toad Goomba shows up and gives them the super scopes and then plays music to distract all the other Goombas. Yes. We skipped over the elevator gag earlier, which was
it went on too long. And basically the punchline is everybody loves to dance. You can check out the movie if you want further details.
Yeah.
And Lance Hendrickson is the king in a very quick cameo. I think his only line is setting up the plumbers or whatever.
setting up
the sequel. Oh, yes, because Lance Henriksen is one of those actors like Danny Trejo or Eric Roberts who is secretly in every movie that has been made in their lifetime.
So they save the day. Everyone cheers. The three of them head to the portal back. And Daisy decides to stay to be with her father and her people. And so Luigi and Daisy have a scene and Mario's like, tell her how you feel. And Luigi says, you know how I feel about you, right? It's been half a day. It's been half a day.
They love each other, Brandon. They love each other. It's a great love affair that started yesterday.
Mario says, if you loved her, you'd understand that she has to stay. It's been half a day.
Yeah.
Maybe been 24 hours.
And then they kiss, and it's 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later?
3 weeks later. Luigi stole the jump shoes, by the way, or whatever they're called, and brought that technology back to their world. But sorry, go ahead, Greg.
So Mario is back to normal. They're making spaghetti, and he's telling Luigi to stop moping around. And then Luigi, you think is heartbroken, but then he gets really excited because they're now on this, the TV show that talks about these strange happenings. And the guy labels them for saving New York, the Super Mario Brothers. But just when you think it's over, the door kind of opens up. Well, there's a knock. It opens up and Daisy is in battle gear, basically. She's
Doc Brown shows up in the DeLorean and says something's got to be done about your kids, Mario's.
Exactly. Yeah. And then smash cut to Super Mario Brothers 2. No, that didn't happen. Yeah. No sequel happened. No. And in fact,
smash cut to a song by Roxette, Swedish pop rock duo.
Roxette. Yeah, that is true. We do have an end song by them, and for it appears that nobody thinks that this film is their best work, because Roxette have been somewhat critical of this song. So,
and no,
this is a quote. This is a quote from one half of Roxette. I still like the song in a way, but if you wanted to make a parody of Roxette, it probably sounds something like this. So, so everybody involved in this project had a great time, is what we're saying. And I guess we should mention that basically there is a post-credit sequence that Craig didn't watch, where two Nintendo representatives pitch a video game to Iggy and Spike. And then that's it. That's Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah. In a post-credit scene prior to the MCU. Very rare.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Doesn't happen often, but
was one of those people Shigeru?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't think it is. I think it's just two actors playing Nintendo representatives. So I don't think it is a cameo from the creator of the game.
And also, it's a mislead, because you think they're in Mario and Luigi's apartment, and then it pans over to Spike and Iggy on the couch.
Yeah. And also. Was it because of this movie and its failure that Nintendo didn't do another live action film until the Detective Pikachu?
It was. Apparently, Nintendo had a live action Metroid Prime movie in the works, or was it? Was it Metroid Prime at that time, or was it Metroid? But anyway, they had a live-action Metroid film in the works alongside Super Mario Bros. It was going to be their next project. and then they scrapped it, and then they just didn't bother making any other live action movie until 2019 when they made Detective Pikachu. So it really put them off making live action movies.
It would have been interesting if they did do like a 90s Metroid movie, because they didn't even know what long story short, they worked with the developer that made like a Metroid game or Metroid game pitch where Samus was, because they call Samus a bounty hunter, right? But like they made like her into an actual bounty hunter, and they pitched it to Nintendo, and Nintendo's like, this isn't Samus at all. What are you doing? And they're like, she's a bounty hunter. This is bounty hunting. and Nintendo was like, oh, we didn't know what that word meant. It just sounded cool. Samus has a heart of gold. And so, that's cool. If you want to hear the actual story on that, go watch Did You Know Gaming. Okay. But that's the TLDW.
That's when they've been talking every, I don't know, want to say probably 5 or 10 years they try to make again. I feel like you'll hear rumors that a script is in the work for a Metroid.
That's
adaptation. You won't hear anything else.
I believe they were working with the Robot Chicken creators to do an animated Star Fox series, but that got scrapped when they made the deal with Illumination.
Okay.
All right. So that kind of wraps it up for this episode. It just leaves us to give final thoughts and for both of you to give your social media details. Brandon, as you're the special guest, you can go first.
Final thoughts on the movie. I remember hating this movie as a kid. Clearly I saw it clearly to me, I saw it a few times because I remembered a lot about it. But going back and watching it 25 to 30 years later, it was nice to see more of the connections, to see that there was some actual care in making these Nintendo Mario connections in the movie that I didn't notice as a kid. If this was not a Mario based movie, I probably would have enjoyed it more because the plot was semi-coherent, and even though it was kind of fetch questy in its structure, it didn't really deter when each set piece had like its own focus of people, and I thought it turned out. I would give it a 4 out of 10. Maybe a 6 out of 10 for my Letterboxd rating, which only does 5 stars. So, well, join me over at Namely 90s on your favorite podcasting platform at namely90s.com/listen. Join us for season 2 with that variety show deep dive format switching off every week. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/rewineshow for all of your wine edutainment needs. We should be kicking off season 4, maybe February, maybe March. I haven't figured it out yet. And sometimes I do streaming things. Currently I am using twitch.tv/bschwitty. That's BSCHWITTY. I'll stream games occasionally, raise money for charity. Oh, and you can find Namely 90s on Twitter and Instagram at Namely 90s with a 90S.
Okay. And Craig?
I agree. I actually was going to say the similar thing to what Brandon was saying, where I do feel like if it wasn't named Super Mario, it would be even more enjoyable. I mean, the biggest things to me was the logic behind it, I guess the story building logic, and then the inconsistencies with tone were kind of the two big issues that I had with it. But yeah, it had some fun moments. And I think I'd mentioned this right before, but I didn't say it during the recording. I enjoy both of those actors a lot. Yeah. Actually, most of the cast, I enjoy the other work they've done. But yeah, I liked both of those actors, but it was the two of them together did not really, I don't know if it was their chemistry or what, but it didn't seem like they were both in the same movie, or they should have been in the brothers in this same movie. But I don't know. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But as much as it kind of broke me halfway through. But yeah, so for my socials, I already talked about the comedy project that I've been working on. But we're about to come back and we're doing a reformatting, which I've mentioned before. I do a podcast that was based on independent horror, more obscure films called Bloodhound Picks, Pix, but we are coming back and incorporating instead more of an understanding of just the actual process for people that want to make their own independent horror movie. And so we're going to break down from everything from the writing of the script to film festival submissions and stuff like that. So that is on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Bloodhound Picks. But if you want to just look up me personally or the comedy project, I'm the Joke that I'm working on. You can look it up on Twitter and Instagram or TikTok, even though I haven't posted a bunch on there. I'm going to start soon, but it's under Guilty Animals, all one word. And yeah, that's me.
And I recommend it. All listeners, check out all of that. In terms of my final thoughts of the film, I kind of agree with a lot of what's been said. The film is kind of a bad movie. It's tonally inconsistent. Its narrative logic is all over the place, but it's also kind of a fun movie. And the cast is good. And even though we know that the cast were not having fun, they managed to convey the look of having fun. On Letterboxd, I ended up giving it kind of 2.5 stars because I think objectively it's probably more like a 2-star film, but like I gave it that extra half star because like the actors entertained me enough and like it's kind of a fun looking film. You know, it's weird that it kind of looks like Blade Runner. Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on it. And if you're not following us on social media already, then you can at 90s Action on Twitter, or, you know, you can obviously catch us wherever you get podcasts from, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or on our Anchor page. And also, I should have mentioned at the top of the show, I forgot that we're also on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. So we're a part of that. And that has, if you are a big action fan, that has lots of different action podcasts for you. Some on Rocky, on Rambo. There's a Dolph Lundgren podcast, an Arnold Schwarzenegger one, a Mel Gibson one, Bruce Willis one. A lot of the kind of classic Hollywood action stars of the 80s and 90s for you there. That's all for this time, but be sure to join us next time when, very excitingly for Craig, we will be covering our first Christopher Lambert movie, Gunman. Until then, though, see ya.